I'm Susan, 29 female. I live in a modest one-bedroom apartment in a city that never sleeps, a place I chose specifically because it was a 3-hour flight away from my family. I work as a senior software engineer, a job I love that pays me well and, more importantly, keeps my mind occupied. For years, my life was a carefully constructed fortress of solitude and financial independence, built to withstand the relentless emotional and financial siege from my family. It was a quiet life, a stable one, and I cherished it more than anything. But the thing about fortresses is that they are built to be tested. My test came in the form of a single, earth-shattering phone call from my mother. A call that would not only threaten my financial security, but would force me to confront a lifetime of manipulation and favoritism, ultimately leading me to sever ties I once thought were unbreakable. This is the story of how a demand for $70,000 to fund my sister's ridiculous startup led me to a new life, a better job, and the sweet, silent satisfaction of 60 missed calls from a family that finally realized they had lost their personal ATM. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from a long day at work, my mind still buzzing with lines of code and the satisfying click of a problem solved. I was looking forward to a quiet evening with a microwave dinner and a new series I'd been meaning to binge. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, displaying a picture of my mother, Nancy. A familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Calls from her were rarely just to chat. They were almost always a prelude to a request, a thinly veiled demand wrapped in a cloak of maternal concern. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my tone light and casual. "Susan, darling, how are you?" Her voice was saccharine sweet, a tone she reserved for when she wanted something significant. I could almost hear the forced smile through the phone. "I'm good, Mom, tired, just got home. What's up?" I moved to the fridge, pulling out a container of leftover pasta, already bracing myself. "Oh, nothing much, dear, just thinking about you. And your sister, of course." There it was, the mention of my younger sister, Catherine, the designated golden child of the family. At 26, Catherine was a master of grand ambitions and zero follow-through. She drifted from one get-rich-quick scheme to another, each one more ridiculous than the last, all funded by our parents' dwindling retirement savings, and whenever they could manage it, my hard-earned money. "How is Catherine?" I asked, my voice flat. "She's wonderful, so creative, so driven. She has this incredible new idea, Susan. It's going to be huge, I just know it." The manufactured excitement in her voice was almost comical. I had heard this speech a dozen times before. There was the failed Etsy shop selling artisanal soap that was just rebranded dollar store bars. There was the disastrous attempt at being a life coach, which lasted exactly as long as her first and only client. Her latest venture, according to the family group chat I mostly muted, was becoming a social media influencer. "That's great," I said, popping my pasta into the microwave. "It is," Nancy gushed. "She's starting her own lifestyle brand. It's all about wellness and positivity. She's going to have a YouTube channel, a blog, a line of merchandise. It's a whole empire, really." An empire built on what, exactly? Catherine's primary skills were taking filtered selfies and complaining about the hardships of living rent-free in our parents' house. I decided to cut to the chase. "Mom, why are you really calling?" There was a slight pause. The sweetness in her voice curdled into something more serious. "Well, darling, as you know, starting a business takes capital, and your sister has such a brilliant vision, but she needs a little help to get it off the ground." "And you and Dad are tapped out," I finished for her. It wasn't a question. "Your father and I have done what we can, but this requires a significant investment," she said, her voice taking on a slightly wounded tone. "We were hoping, well, we know you're doing so well for yourself, that fancy tech job of yours." I hated when she called it that. She made it sound like I won the lottery, not like I'd spent years of my life studying, working thankless internships, and climbing the corporate ladder in a male-dominated field. My success wasn't luck. It was the result of relentless hard work, something my family seemed to fundamentally misunderstand. "How much, Mom?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. She took a deep, dramatic breath. $70,000. I almost dropped my fork. The microwave beeped. But I didn't move. The number hung in the air between us, obscene and absurd. 70,000? Are you kidding me? "Now, Susan, don't be like that," she chided, her voice hardening. "It's not a gift. It's a loan, an investment in your sister's future. She'll pay you back with interest once the business takes off. She's even had her boyfriend, Christopher, draw up a business plan. It's very professional." Christopher was a 27-year-old barista who still thought NFTs were a viable career path. The idea of him creating a professional business plan was laughable. The entire proposal was a black hole designed to suck my savings into the void of Catherine's incompetence. "No," I said, the word coming out colder and sharper than I intended. "No, what do you mean, no?" Nancy's voice spiked with indignation. "Susan, this is your sister we're talking about. Family is supposed to support each other." "I do support Catherine," I retorted, my own anger starting to rise. "I supported her when I paid her car insurance for a year. I supported her when I covered her rent for 6 months after she decided her last job was stifling her creativity. I have been supporting her my entire life. $70,000 isn't support, Mom. It's insanity." "It's not insane. It's for her future," she insisted. "Don't you want to see your sister succeed? Or are you just happy to sit up there in your fancy apartment, hoarding your money while the rest of us struggle?" The accusation stung, sharp and familiar. This was their go-to tactic, painting me as a selfish, greedy dragon sitting on a pile of gold, unwilling to share with my long-suffering family. It ignored the fact that my hoard was my emergency fund, my retirement savings, the down payment I was painstakingly saving for a house of my own. It was my security, the one thing in my life that was truly mine. "My finances are none of your business," I said, my voice trembling slightly with rage. "I work hard for my money. I'm not setting it on fire to fund Catherine's latest whim. The answer is no." "You're being selfish, Susan," she snapped. "I don't know what's happened to you. You've become so cold. This is what happens when you prioritize a career over family." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. They had always praised my ambition when it meant I could bail them out of a jam, but the moment I drew a line, my success became a character flaw. "I have to go, Mom." "Don't you hang up on me," she warned. "We're not done talking about this. Your sister needs this. We need this." "The conversation is over," I said firmly. "I'm not giving her the money. Not now, not ever. Goodbye." I ended the call before she could respond, my heart pounding in my chest. I sank into a kitchen chair, the plate of pasta forgotten. The silence of my apartment felt heavy, the peace I'd so carefully cultivated shattered. This wasn't just about money. It was about a lifetime of being treated as a resource rather than a daughter. It was about the gnawing realization that to my family, my worth was not in who I was, but in what I could provide. And I was done. I just didn't realize that this, no, was not the end of the battle, but the first shot in a war I never wanted to fight. Growing up, the dynamic in our house was crystal clear. Catherine was the star, and I was the stagehand. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I was the responsible one, the one who was expected to clean up her messes. Catherine was praised for her free spirit and creativity, which were just code words for her laziness and lack of discipline. I was praised for my maturity and reliability, which meant I was expected to be a parent to my own sister long before I was old enough to understand what that meant. It started with small things. When we were kids, if Catherine broke a vase, she would cry, and I would be the one told to get the dustpan because I was the sensible one. If she failed a test, my parents would blame the teacher for not understanding her unique learning style. If I got anything less than an A, I was asked why I wasn't trying harder. Our achievements were measured on two completely different scales. Hers were celebrated with cake and fanfare. Mine were met with a nod and an expectation of more. This disparity only grew as we got older. In high school, Catherine decided she was going to be an actress. My parents poured thousands of dollars into acting classes, headshots, and trips to auditions she was never prepared for. When that fizzled out, she announced she was going to be a musician. An expensive guitar and a series of lessons followed, only for the instrument to gather dust in a corner after a few months. Meanwhile, I worked a part-time job all through high school to save for college, because it was made implicitly clear that their resources were reserved for funding Catherine's fleeting passions. When I got a scholarship to a prestigious university to study compute, my parents' reaction was muted. They were proud, I suppose, but it was a quiet, almost reluctant pride. My path was too practical, too straightforward. It lacked the glamour of Catherine's artistic pursuits. "It's good you're getting a sensible degree, Susan," my father, Alfie, had said. "Someone in this family needs to be practical." The subtext was clear. I was the workhorse, the designated breadwinner who would one day be expected to support Catherine's dreams. And support them I did. During my first few years out of college, while I was working an entry-level job and living with 3 roommates to make ends meet, the calls for money started. First, it was small amounts. "Catherine's a little short on her phone bill this month, can you help her out?" Then it escalated. "Catherine's car broke down, and you know she needs it to get to her auditions." "Catherine found the most amazing unpaid internship, but she needs help with her living expenses." Each request was framed as a temporary setback, a small bump on her road to inevitable stardom. I paid, partly out of a sense of familial duty, and partly just to get them off my back. The problem was, Catherine never saw it as help. She saw it as her due. She never once said thank you. In fact, on the rare occasions we spoke, she would make passive-aggressive comments about my boring life and my corporate sellout job. She seemed to resent the very money she was so eager to take, as if my financial stability was a personal affront to her artistic integrity. The cycle was always the same. My parents would call me, lay on the guilt, and I would transfer the money. Then, a few weeks later, I would see pictures of Catherine on social media, wearing new clothes, out at expensive restaurants, or on a spontaneous weekend trip with her perpetually broke boyfriend, Christopher. It was a slap in the face every single time. My hard-earned money, the money I was saving for my own future, was being used to fund her frivolous lifestyle, all under the guise of supporting her dream. I tried to talk to my parents about it. I sat them down one Christmas and tried to explain how unfair the situation was. "It's not just the money," I told them, my voice pleading. "It's the expectation. It's the fact that you never ask me what's going on in my life. You only ever call to ask for something for Catherine." My mother had looked at me with a bewildered expression. "But Susan, your life is so stable. You don't need our help. Catherine does. She's sensitive. The world is a hard place for artistic souls like her." My father had just nodded in agreement, adding, "Your sister just needs a little more time to find her footing. You're the strong one, Susan. You can handle it." They didn't see me as their daughter. They saw me as a utility. I was the family's safety net, their emergency fund, their ATM. My role was to be successful and silent, to provide without complaint, and to expect nothing in return. My own dreams, my own desires, my own struggles, they were irrelevant. All that mattered was propping up the fragile ego of the golden child. That conversation was a turning point for me. It was the moment I realized that they would never change. Their family unit was a dysfunctional ecosystem that required me to be the provider and Catherine to be the taker. Any attempt to alter that dynamic was seen as a betrayal. So I started pulling away. I moved to a new city for a better job opportunity, putting physical distance between us. I stopped answering their calls as frequently. I started saying no to the smaller requests for money. It was difficult. The guilt trips were intense. My mother would cry, my father would sound disappointed, and Catherine would send me scathing texts about how I had abandoned them. But for the first time in my life, I was putting myself first. I was building a life that was my own, on my own terms. My savings account was growing. I was making friends who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. I was happy. And then came the call for the $70,000. It was the culmination of everything, the most audacious demand they had ever made. It was as if they sensed that I was slipping away, and this was their final, desperate attempt to pull me back into my designated role. But they had miscalculated. They thought that after all these years, I could still be manipulated by guilt. They didn't realize that the ATM was permanently out of service. This wasn't just about refusing a loan. It was about refusing to play a role I had never auditioned for. It was about taking back my life, once and for all. After the explosive phone call with my mother, a week of tense silence followed. I knew it was the calm before the storm. They were regrouping, strategizing their next line of attack. I used the time to shore up my own defenses, reminding myself of all the reasons I had said no. I even had a long video call with my best friend, Maya, who had been my sounding board through years of family drama. $70,000, she had shrieked, her eyes wide with disbelief. To be an influencer? Does Catherine even know what that entails? Does she think you just post a few selfies and Dior sends you a truck full of money? Apparently, I sighed, swirling the wine in my glass. According to the business plan Christopher put together, she's projecting a six-figure income in her first year. Maya choked on her wine. Based on what? Her 300 followers, half of whom are probably bots and the other half are our relatives. Exactly. Her laughter faded, and she gave me a serious look. You did the right thing, Susan. You know that, right? This is a new level of insanity, even for them. I know, I said, though a small part of me still felt a pang of guilt. It was a conditioned response, a reflex honed over decades of emotional manipulation. It's just, they make me feel like I'm the villain. You're not the villain, she said firmly. You're the one who escaped, and they hate you for it. She was right. My independence was a threat to their entire system. The storm broke the following Saturday. I received a long, rambling email from Catherine. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression, entitlement, and delusional self-importance. The subject line was simply, "An opportunity you're throwing away." "Dear Susan," it began, "I am writing to you not as a sister who needs a favor, but as a future business leader offering you a ground-floor investment opportunity." I was deeply hurt and, frankly, shocked to hear from Mom that you had so coldly dismissed my proposal without even having the courtesy to look at my business plan. I had to stop and laugh, as if I would ever be given the chance to review it. The plan was a mythical document, a carrot dangled to give their absurd request a veneer of legitimacy. The email went on to describe her vision for the Catherine lifestyle brand. It was a jumble of buzzwords she had clearly picked up from other influencers. She talked about authenticity, curated content, and synergistic brand partnerships. She claimed she had already been in talks with several major brands who were very interested in sponsoring her, a claim I knew was an outright lie. The centerpiece of her plan was a launch event, a lavish party to introduce her brand to the world. And that, it turned out, was where the $70,000 was going. The email included a rough budget breakdown. It was horrifying. $20,000 for a venue, $15,000 for catering and an open bar, $10,000 for a celebrity DJ, $5,000 for a professional photographer and videographer, $10,000 for promotional materials, which I assumed meant custom-printed napkins and T-shirts with her face on them, and a whopping $10,000 for her and Christopher's launch outfits. There was not a single dollar allocated to website development, marketing, equipment, or any of the actual nuts and bolts of starting a digital media business. Her plan wasn't to build a business, it was to throw a party. A ridiculously expensive, ego-stroking party funded by my life savings. She was asking for $70,000 to play pretend for a night. The email concluded with a final, manipulative flourish. I know you've always been a little jealous of my creative talents, and I understand that it must be hard for you, Sint. In your boring little cubicle to comprehend a vision as big as mine. But I'm offering you a chance to be a part of something special. If you can't see that, then I just feel sorry for you. This is your last chance, Susan. Don't let bitterness and jealousy ruin what could be a wonderful opportunity for our family to finally have something to be proud of. The sheer audacity of it left me speechless. Jealous? I was the one with a successful career, financial independence, and a life I had built myself. She was a 26-year-old unemployed woman living with her parents, trying to con her sister out of a fortune to throw a party. The delusion was staggering. I didn't reply to the email. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't be twisted and used against me. Instead, I did something I should have done years ago. I started digging. Her grand delusion was so over the top, so disconnected from reality, that it made me wonder what else they were lying about. This wasn't just about a stupid startup anymore. There had to be something more going on. My first stop was Catherine's social media. I unmuted her from my feed and scrolled through months of posts. It was the curated highlight reel I expected. Brunch photos, filtered selfies with vapid captions about living your best life, and staged shots with Christopher where they looked like a catalog couple. But then I noticed something. In the background of a few recent photos, I saw glimpses of expensive shopping bags, new furniture at my parents' house, and even a new designer dog that I had never heard about before. Where was the money for all this coming from? My parents were comfortable, but they weren't wealthy. They were living on a fixed retirement income. They certainly didn't have the cash for this kind of spending spree. Then I remembered something my mother had said on the phone. "Your father and I have done what we can." What exactly had they done? My father, Alfie, was a meticulous man. He had been an accountant before he retired. He was careful with money, almost to a fault. It seemed out of character for him to be so reckless. An uneasy feeling started to creep over me. This wasn't just about Catherine's latest whim. This was bigger. The demand for $70,000 wasn't just an investment in a fake business. It was an act of desperation, and I was determined to find out why. The digital breadcrumbs were there, I just needed to follow them. My investigation began with a simple premise. My family was spending money they didn't have, and they were trying to get me to cover the shortfall. The question was, where had their money gone? My father had always been proud of his financial planning. He had a pension, a 401(k), and a portfolio of safe, boring investments. They should have been more than comfortable. I started with public records. It was a long shot, but sometimes you could find property records, liens, or court judgments online. I spent an evening searching county and state databases. At first, I found nothing. Their house was in their name, with no new mortgages or liens against it. No bankruptcies, no lawsuits. It was a dead end. My next thought was to look into their known expenses. The biggest one that came to mind was their house. I remembered my dad proudly declaring that he had paid off the mortgage 5 years ago. But had he? I logged into my old shared family cloud account, an account I hadn't accessed in years but had never been removed from. It was a digital time capsule, filled with old family photos and documents. I navigated to a folder labeled Household Finances. It was password protected, but my dad was a man of habit. I tried his old, predictable password, a combination of their anniversary and their first dog's name. It worked. I felt a pang of guilt as the folder opened, but I pushed it down. This was no longer about snooping, it was about self-preservation. Inside were scanned copies of bank statements, tax returns, and mortgage documents. I clicked on the most recent mortgage statement. My blood ran cold. Not only was there still a mortgage on the house, but the balance was higher than it had been 5 years ago. They had taken out a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit, for a substantial amount. The date on the loan origination document was just over a year ago. My heart pounded in my chest as I pieced it together. They had lied about paying off the house. They had leveraged their only significant asset and were now drowning in debt. I scrolled through the bank statements. The transaction history told a grim story. There were huge cash withdrawals, transfers to Catherine's bank account labeled business seed money, and charges from high-end department stores. They had been funding her lifestyle, and Christopher's, for over a year, systematically draining their home equity to do it. But it got worse. I noticed a series of recurring payments to an investment company I didn't recognize. The name was Quantum L. Eep Financial. It sounded like something out of a bad sci-fi movie. I did a quick Google search. The first few results were glowing testimonials and a slick, professional-looking website promising guaranteed high-yield returns on cryptocurrency and forex trading. The deeper I dug, the more red flags appeared. The company had no physical address. The founders were anonymous. The forums were filled with complaints from people who had invested their life savings and then been unable to withdraw their money. It was a classic Ponzi scheme. My father, the careful, meticulous accountant, had fallen for an online scam, and it seemed he had fallen hard. The bank statements showed he had invested a massive chunk of their home equity loan into this fake company. The money was gone, all of it. Suddenly, everything made sense. The desperation in my mother's voice, the absurd, over-the-top demand for $70,000. They weren't just funding Catherine's influencer fantasy. They were trying to plug a massive, gaping hole in their finances. They had gambled their retirement on a scam and lost, and now they were coming to me to bail them out, using Catherine as the excuse. The $70,000 wasn't for a launch party. It was to cover the mortgage payments and the mounting credit card debt they had accrued keeping up appearances. The sense of betrayal I felt was profound. It wasn't just that they had lied to me, it was the depth and complexity of the deception. They had concocted this entire story about Catherine's startup, complete with a fake business plan, all to hide their own catastrophic financial failure. They were willing to sacrifice my future to cover up their mistakes. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating the dark room. The anger I had felt before was now replaced by a cold, hard clarity. This was no longer a family squabble. This was a calculated attempt at financial fraud. They saw me as the solution to a problem they had created, a problem they had hidden from me for over a year. I thought about confronting them. I pictured the screaming match, the tears, the accusations. My mother would call me cruel for exposing them. My father would be humiliated. Catherine would somehow twist it to make herself the victim. It would solve nothing. It would only drag me deeper into their mess. There was only one path forward. It was a path I had been slowly paving for years, but now I knew I had to take it at a run. I needed to get away, to put as much distance as possible between myself and their toxicity. My quiet life 3 hours away was no longer enough. I needed a new life, a new city, a new everything. I needed to become completely unreachable, to sever every financial and emotional tie that still bound me to them. I closed the laptop, my decision made. They had left a trail of digital breadcrumbs that led me to the truth. Now, I would use my own digital skills to erase my tracks and disappear from their lives for good. The next phase of my life was about to begin, and it would be built on a foundation of absolute, uncompromising independence. The discovery of my family's financial ruin lit a fire under me. The need to escape became an urgent, all-consuming priority. That night, I updated my resume, polished my online portfolio, and began applying for jobs in cities on the opposite side of the country. I wasn't just looking for a new job, I was looking for a new life, one that was geographically and financially insulated from the black hole of my family's creation. My field, software engineering, is in high demand, and my resume was strong. Within a week, my inbox was flooded with requests for interviews. Recruiters from Seattle, Austin, and San Francisco were all eager to talk. It was a dizzying, empowering experience. For the first time, I felt like I was in complete control of my own destiny. I went through a whirlwind of video interviews, technical assessments, and final round panels. I was focused and driven, fueled by the knowledge of what I was running from. 2 weeks into my search, I had 2 incredible offers on the table. One was from a well-established tech giant in Seattle, and the other was from a smaller, innovative startup in San Francisco. Both offered a significant pay raise, a generous relocation package, and exciting work. As I was weighing my options, a third company, one I had almost forgotten I had applied to, reached out. It was a fintech company based in a smaller, more affordable city on the West Coast. They were known for their cutting-edge work and incredible work-life balance. The final interview was with their chief technology officer. He was brilliant, and we clicked immediately. He wasn't just interested in my coding skills, he was interested in my ideas. The next day, they sent me an offer. It was staggering. The salary was nearly double what I was currently making. The benefits were top tier. They offered a relocation bonus that would cover not only my moving expenses, but also allow me to furnish a new apartment and still have a substantial amount left over. It was a life-changing offer. There was no hesitation. I accepted on the spot. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. I gave notice at my job, where my boss was sad to see me go but incredibly supportive. I hired a moving company to pack up my entire life. I found a beautiful new apartment online in my new city, just a short walk from my new office. With every box I packed and every arrangement I made, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I was systematically dismantling the life that was accessible to my family and building a new one that was entirely my own. During this time, I kept my phone on silent. The calls and texts from my mother and Catherine continued, but I ignored them. They had escalated from guilt trips to outright demands. They accused me of being selfish, cruel, and ungrateful. They seemed to be in a state of panic, and I knew why. Their financial house of cards was collapsing, and their last-ditch bailout plan had failed. The day before the movers were scheduled to arrive, I got a text from my mother that was different from the others. It was short and chillingly calm. "Your father isn't well. We need to talk." For a moment, I faltered. What if he was really sick? Was I being a monster by ignoring them? I typed out a reply, my fingers hovering over the send button. But then I stopped. I remembered the lies, the manipulation, the sheer disrespect they had shown me my entire life. This was just another tactic, another lever they were pulling to get what they wanted. It was a test. I deleted the text and blocked her number. Then I blocked Catherine's and my father's. I went through my social media and scrubbed every trace of my location and employer. I was becoming a ghost. The movers came the next day and loaded everything I owned onto a truck. I surrendered the keys to my apartment, took one last look at the place that had been my sanctuary, and drove to the airport. As I sat at the gate, waiting to board the plane that would take me to my new life, I felt a profound sense of peace. It was the peace of a prisoner who has just broken free. I landed in my new city that evening. The air felt different, cleaner. The sky seemed bigger. I took a taxi to the hotel the company had booked for me. The next morning, I signed the lease on my new apartment. It was bright and airy, with a small balcony that overlooked a park. It was perfect. That weekend, my belongings arrived. As I began to unpack, to literally build my new home, my new life, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for my own strength, for my ability to build a career that had given me this freedom. Gratitude for the fact that I had said no. That single word had been the key that unlocked this new reality for me. My new job started that Monday. The office was incredible, filled with smart, passionate people. I was given challenging, meaningful work from day one. I was treated as a valued colleague, a respected professional. My ideas were listened to and implemented. For the first time in my career, I felt like I truly belonged. I had done it. I had moved across the country, started a dream job that paid me more than I had ever imagined, and cut off the toxic people who had been holding me back. I was free. I thought the war was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. The final battle was yet to come, and it would arrive in the form of a Christmas ultimatum. The next few months were the happiest of my life. I thrived in my new job. I made new friends. I explored my new city, discovering hiking trails, cozy coffee shops, and quirky independent bookstores. I was building a life that was rich and fulfilling, a life that had nothing to do with my family. I had maintained my radio silence, and after a few weeks of trying to reach me through blocked numbers and new social media profiles, they seemed to have given up. The silence was a balm to my soul. As the holidays approached, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since I was a child. There would be no obligatory trip home, no tense family dinners, no passive-aggressive comments about my life choices. I made plans to spend a quiet Christmas with my friend Maya, who was flying out to visit me. We were going to cook a nice meal, drink wine, and watch old movies. It was going to be perfect. 2 hours before Maya's flight was scheduled to land, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat. I knew, instinctively, who it was from. The text read, "This is Nancy. I know you've been ignoring us, but this has gone on long enough. Your sister is in a lot of trouble. She took out some loans for her business based on your promise to help her, and now she's going to default. You have to help her. Don't you dare think about spending Christmas enjoying your new life without covering her debt." I stared at the message, a cold fury washing over me. The lies were so audacious, so shameless that it was almost impressive. My promise? I had never promised them anything. In fact, I had explicitly and repeatedly refused. And Catherine taking out loans? From who? No legitimate bank would ever lend money to someone with her financial history for a business with no assets and no revenue. This was a bluff, a desperate, last-ditch attempt at blackmail. They were trying to ruin my holiday, to poison the peace I had worked so hard to create. They couldn't stand the thought of me being happy and free while they were stewing in the consequences of their own actions. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, deleting the message, blocking the number, and moving on with my day. But something inside me snapped. I was done being their punching bag. I was done being the silent, long-suffering victim. They had fired the last shot, and I was going to end this war once and for all. I spent the next hour on my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I logged into every account I still shared with them. The cell phone plan, which was still under my name from years ago because I had a better corporate discount. The streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, that I paid for and they all used. The Amazon Prime account that was linked to my credit card. One by one, I systematically cut them off. I initiated a transfer of liability for their phone numbers, a process that would disconnect their service within 24 hours unless they set up their own account with their own credit card. I went into the settings for each streaming service and logged out all devices, then changed the passwords. I went into my Amazon account, removed their shipping addresses and saved payment methods, and changed the password. Then, I logged into the shared family cloud account, the one where I had found the evidence of their financial ruin. I downloaded all the incriminating documents: the second mortgage application, the bank statements showing the transfers to Catherine and the payments to the Ponzi scheme, the credit card bills filled with lavish, irresponsible purchases. I saved everything to a secure, encrypted hard drive. My final act was to draft an email. I attached all the documents I had downloaded. I sent it to my mother, my father, and my sister from a new, anonymous email address. The subject line was, "All the receipts." The body of the email was short and to the point. "I know everything," I wrote. "I know about the second mortgage. I know about the Ponzi scheme. I know you blew through your retirement savings and home equity to fund Catherine's lifestyle and then tried to trick me into paying for your mistakes. The $70,000 was never for a startup. It was to cover the debts you hid from me. You have lied to me, manipulated me, and tried to sabotage my life for the last time. As of tonight, you are cut off from every account I have ever paid for. The phones will be shut off tomorrow. The streaming services are gone. The Amazon account is locked. Do not ever contact me again. If you or anyone associated with you attempts to reach me, I will forward this email, with all of its attachments, to every member of our extended family. I will post it on every social media platform. Everyone will know what you did. You wanted me to cover your debts. Consider this my final payment. I am covering my own exit fee. Goodbye." I hit send. A wave of adrenaline and relief washed over me. It was done. The final tie was severed. I had not only refused to be blackmailed, but I had turned the tables on them. I had taken away their power, the power they had wielded over me for my entire life. I turned off my laptop, took a deep breath, and went to get ready to pick up Maya from the airport. My phone was silent for the rest of an hour. Then, just as I was about to leave, it started. Ed to buzz, and it didn't stop. A call from an unknown number, then another, and another. They were coming from different area codes, from burner apps, from pay-as-you-go phones. They were panicking. The silence had been broken, but it was their silence, not mine, that was now filled with fear. I didn't answer a single call. I let my phone buzz on the counter as I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. The drive to the airport was surreal. The frantic buzzing of my phone was the soundtrack to my liberation. Each missed call was a confirmation that I had made the right decision. Each unanswered ring was a victory. By the time I picked up Maya, who ran to me with a huge hug and a bottle of celebratory champagne, there were 27 missed calls. "What is going on with your phone?" she asked as we got in the car. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. "It's the sound of freedom," I said, and proceeded to tell her everything. We spent the evening celebrating. We toasted to my new life, to my new job, to my newfound courage. We laughed at the absurdity of it all, the sheer, unmitigated gall of my family. For the first time, I was able to see their actions not as a personal failing on my part, but as a reflection of their own deep-seated dysfunction. Their toxicity was their problem, not mine. I had just been the unfortunate outlet for it. By the next morning, Christmas Eve, the number of missed calls had climbed to over 60. There were also a dozen hysterical voicemails, which I listened to with a strange sense of detachment. My mother was sobbing, accusing me of being cruel and heartless. My father left a short, clipped message, his voice tight with anger, telling me I had crossed a line. Catherine S. was the most revealing. She was screaming, not about the money, but about the fact that her Netflix had stopped working in the middle of a movie. It was all the proof I needed that I had done the right thing. Their priorities were so warped, so completely self-absorbed, that they couldn't see the bigger picture. They weren't sorry for what they had done, they were just sorry they had gotten caught. Christmas Day was the most peaceful I had had in years. Maya and I cooked, we exchanged gifts, we watched cheesy holiday movies. My phone remained silent. The barrage of calls had stopped. My final email, my nuclear option, had worked. They knew I had them cornered. The threat of exposure was the only language they understood. In the weeks and months that followed, the silence held. I heard nothing from them. Through the grapevine of extended family, I learned that they had been forced to sell the house. They had to downsize to a small rental apartment in a less desirable part of town. My father had to take a part-time job at a hardware store to make ends meet. Catherine and Christopher had, predictably, broken up under the financial strain. She was now working as a waitress, the Catherine lifestyle brand, a forgotten dream. I felt a twinge of sadness for the family I wished I had, for the parents who might have been supportive, and the sister who could have been a friend. But that family had never really existed. It was a fantasy I had clung to for far too long. The reality was that they were selfish, manipulative people who had seen me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. My life, on the other hand, continued to blossom. I was promoted at work. I bought a car. I started dating someone, a kind, intelligent man who respected my independence and admired my strength. I was building a future that was bright and full of promise, a future I had almost sacrificed for a family that didn't deserve me. The silence from them is no longer a tense, anxious void. It is a comfortable, peaceful space. It is the sound of my own life, uninterrupted by guilt, demands, or manipulation. I cut them off not just to protect my finances, but to protect my soul. I chose myself, and it was the best decision I have ever made. They wanted me to cover their debts, and in the end, I did. I paid the price for my own freedom, and it was worth every penny.